We hear it on the news, we see it on Instagram posts, and we see about the latest victim talking about it. Unfortunately, many of us experience it, and in recent times, the situation has got so much worse. Unfortunately, racism has made its way in sports and has been trying to ruin it. But together, we can put an end to it. Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the Hurdle YouTube channel, joined by our host Dr. Bose. This week, we shall go in depth in the topic of racism and see how it has affected us and millions of other athletes. We should also talk about the emotional and physical damage that it has endured on these athletes, as well as the different communities that have been affected by racism. As much as I would love to bring light to all of the different racist incidents, I have only decided to pick 4 topics on racism. And I would also like to state before starting is that there is no room for racism in our society. And without further ado, let's go straight into the video. This summer we witnessed history. England has made its way to their first ever cup final in 50 years. Gareth Southgate's multi-raced young team had captured the attention of all sports fans and England supporters. Amongst the players were 23-year-old Marcus Rashford, whose contributions to providing underprivileged British kids free hot meals had got him awarded with the MBE Awards, as well as 21-year-old Jadon Sancho, whose silky and technical skills contributed to England qualifying to the first final. And lastly is 19-year-old teen superstar Bukayo Saka, with his lightning speed and that leaves defenders to the ground. All these players share one thing in common. They all are people of color. England were faced to set Italy in the finals. However, England would go on to lose via penalties. England would go on to lose with 3 penalties being missed. Amongst those 3 players that missed the penalties were none other than Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, and Bukayo Saka. Immediately after the match ended, the social media accounts of these players were bombarded with racist comments and messages by their own fans. The day after the match broke headlines all over the world, but for all the wrong reasons. Marcus Rashford's mural was vandalized, Jadon Sancho and Bukayo Saka were bombarded with racist messages, and yet again, racism had made its way back to football. Facebook and Instagram made some efforts in permanently banning those who had made racist comments and tweets. Ex-England and Man United superstar Gary Neville shared his thoughts about it.
Yeah, listen, we've got to ask you, Gary, about the racist online abuse aimed at Rashford, Sancho and Saka, of course, after their misses. We've seen so much unity after the last 4 weeks, but as soon as something goes wrong, the very worst of society comes out, doesn't it?
But what do you expect? What do you expect? You know, 3 weeks ago, we had a manager I think everybody in this country trusts, a leader who everybody in this country trusts. We had players line up for 5 days on the bounce, telling us that they were taking the knee for racism, against racism, and to promote equality. And we had high-ranking ministers, including the Prime Minister in this country, say that it's okay for our population to boo them for taking the knee against racism and promoting equality. So when it starts at the top, what do you think is going to happen underneath in life? You know, if your parents do something, the children follow. So why are we surprised by this anymore? You know, seriously, we've got to look at the roots of this. There's been so much division in this country over the last 2 or 3 years through the way in which Brexit was debated, not Brexit itself, you know, remain or leave, the actual way in which it was debated. It promotes division. The taking of the knee over last month when the players tried to explain it to promote equality and be against racism was ridiculed by our top-ranking government officials. So when we get racist abuse after a football match, at the end of a tournament, I expect it, unfortunately, because it exists and it's actually promoted by the Prime Minister.
However, not all hopes were lost. Marcus Rashford's mural was decorated by fans, Sancho and Saka got tons of positive tweets, and the captain of the squad, Harry Kane, told racists that they were not England fans. After all the sport, the players had this to say. Rashford apologized to fans for missing the penalty, but he said he will never apologize for who he is and where he comes from. In quote, I've grown into a sport where I expect to read things about myself, whether it can be color of my skin, where I grew up, or most recently where I decided to spend my time off the pitch. Saka and Sancho, who were 19 and 21 years old respectively, also posted statements on their social media reflecting on the game. In quote, "There are no words to tell you how disappointed I am with the result of my penalty," wrote Bukayo Saka, with over 2.5 million likes and supportive comments from fellow Arsenal players Ben White, Joe Willock, and more. Meanwhile, Sancho deemed missing the penalty by far the worst feeling he's ever felt in his career. The abuse was quickly condemned by England's Football Associates, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and even Prince Williams. An arrest has been made in the retaliation of offensive comments. The targeted players have pushed for meaningful action from social media companies to prevent online hate from resurfacing. Indonesia consists of a lot of people with different backgrounds on society, with 1,340 ethnicities in the country, 2 race and 6 different religion beliefs. Indonesia has become a country known for its diversity in the world. However, racism, ethnic discrimination, and religion discrimination already has incurred on different spheres of life, and sports also becoming one of them. Racism in Indonesian football usually happens when some supporters fight when Javanese football club against Papua's football club. This is because of race difference, and some supporters give mockery to Papua's player who have usually darker skin. Another improper act of racism is when ethnic Chinese Indonesians lose in badminton competitions and later on will be bombarded with racist tweets and comments in their social media account. The government of Indonesia has already established an acronym for the issue, which was called SARA, which stands for Ethnics, Religion, Race, and Intergroup. This study is believed that Racism and Discrimination Act was coming from the social media impact and is seen every day by the society, especially nowadays with so many of us being connected to social media. To go more in depth, the racism in Indonesia has started in 1998 after the Reformation era. People started to speak up in their mind about everything after the dictatorship era of 32 years. However, racism and the SARA issue started becoming a trend topic in the president election in 2010. In sports area, racism issue also blew up in 2000 after Sydney Olympic events. This happened because Indonesians were angry about the country achievement in the event, and they blamed the athletes with Chinese ancestry that did not give the medallion for the. And because of this, in 2001, there was a big fight in a league match between Papua's football club and Javanese football club. Some sociology and psychology studies always see the problem of racism and stereotyping development starts within the society. And some study believes that racism also can start from the media without any literation and content limitation in the sports news, especially in every racism issues on online media. In order for racism in sports to dwindle, extreme and strict precautions need to be established onto media companies, and those who are guilty need to be held accountable. There also needs to be a nationwide effort so more of these problems don't rise up again. Basketball has been grown to one of the biggest sports in the world, following behind from football, with millions of fans and players from all around the world watching it, with the NBA being the biggest league filled with many talented players. However, with 76% of the players from the NBA being black, racism has also made its way in basketball. There is a common stereotype that black people are way more athletic compared to other races, and in a highly athletically demanding sport such as basketball, many people think that there should be a separate league made for whites only. The most famous being that of Don Moose Lewis' idea of starting the AABA, which is an all-white basketball league in which they claim to be promoting the American way of basketball. The intentions of the AABA are to have a league spanning in 12 cities, each with its own elite basketball team. In order to be a member of the team, an individual must be naturally born citizen of the United States, but have a Caucasian mother and father. So you see, promoting the American way of basketball in the terms of Don Lewis returning to fundamental basketballs gives white basketball players an opportunity to participate in a game without being attacked by street basketball players. Those were the extreme comments made by Don Lewis. However, there still have been many instances with racism, such as the time Russell Westbrook was attacked and racially abused by fans. Here's the clip.
How it started was a young man and his wife in the stands told me to get down on my knees like he used to. And for me, that's just completely disrespectful to me. I think it's racial. I think it's just inappropriate in the sense of there's no protection for the players. I think there are a lot of great fans around the world that like to come to the game and enjoy the game. And there are people that come to the game and to say mean, disrespectful things about me, my family. For many years, man, I've done all the right things. I've never done anything to hurt or harm anybody. I've never been in any trouble. Never fought a fan. Been in the league 11 years, clean slate. Like that's just one video, but throughout the whole game, since I've been here, especially here in Utah, every time I come here, it's a lot of disrespectful things I said, and for me, I'm just not gonna continue to take the disrespect from my family. I just think that there's got to be something done. There's got to be some consequences for those type of people that come to the game just to say and do whatever they want to say. And I don't think it's fair to the players, not just to me, but I don't think it's fair to the players. And if I had to do it over again, I would say the same exact thing, because I truly will stand up for myself, for my family, for my kids, for my wife, for my mom, for my dad every single time. I expect anybody else to do the same.
The AAB claimed that the League of White Basketball Players has the ability to play more and sound fundamental basketball, opposing a great insult to non-white NBA legends over the decades, such as Michael Jordan, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, and Kobe Bryant, just to name a few. Lewis's comments primarily pertain to athleticism of African American players possessed in leagues all over the US, particularly in the highest league of NBA, in comparison to the white players who allegedly lack athleticism. Fortunately, the league has been disbanded after officials deemed it racist. The NBA has therefore made efforts in banning racist fans and have contacted social media companies to block fans, as well as preach the famous Black Lives Matter chant before every game. Some players have even taken it upon themselves to spread the preach of Black Lives Matter. Finally, we reach our last topic. This next individual was the first ever individual to break the color barrier in the Major League Baseball. And even after his days of retiring as a professional athlete was over, he worked hard as being an activist to black people in America. None other than Jackie Robinson. He believed that baseball was a sport for every man to play, regardless of race. Jackie Robinson once famously said, "Somebody told me baseball was a white man's game." He couldn't have been more wrong. On April 15, 1947, Jackie Robinson, age 28, became the first ever African American to play in the Major League Baseball, playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Robinson broke the color barrier in a sport that has been segregated for more than 50 years. Exactly 50 years later, after Jackie Robinson was first signed, on April 5th, 1997, Jackie Robinson's famous number 42 was retired by the Major League Baseball. Growing up, Jackie Roosevelt Robinson was faced head-on with countless of incidents of racism. He was also excelling in many sports and attended the University of California at Los Angeles, where he was the first ever athlete to letter in 4 varsity sports, being baseball, basketball, football, and track. As stated before, as a kid living in the 1920s of America, he experienced a lot of racism. And after protesting in instances of racial discrimination during his military service, Robinson was court-martialed in 1944. Ultimately, he was honorably discharged. After the Army, Robinson played for a season in the Negro African League in 1946. He spent 1 season with the Canadian minor leagues, the Montreal Royals, and in 1947, Robinson was called up for the majors and soon became a star infielder at the outfield of the Dodgers. Despite his talents and being a successful player, Robinson faced tremendous racial discrimination throughout his career from baseball fans and some fellow players. Additionally, the Jim Crow laws of that time prevented Robinson from using the same hotels and restaurants as his white teammates. But that did not stop him from preaching his dreams for all blacks in America and becoming a great player. In an interview in the Dig Kevin talk show with Jackie Robinson, we learned more about Jackie Robinson and his story.
Is it possible that it's been a quarter of a century since you first played in the major leagues? I can't believe. Yeah, I guess I can believe it. It's on the books, isn't it?
It's every bit of that. It seems a lot longer.
Yeah. Did you think things would come as far as they have? Or did you ever think it might not work?
Well, there were times certainly when we thought it wouldn't work, but with the numbers of people that helped, we certainly thought that things would go as they have now, and even a lot further in terms of the front office and the managerial role and that kind of thing. But certainly baseball has grown considerably, and we're quite proud of the role that we played in it.
It's incredible now to think of a sport that big that was all non-black.
Yes.
I mean, so many black stars in baseball now.
Well, you can't even count them today. It's amazing to me. I keep reading about certain ball players, and one day I look on television and he's black. There's no longer a mention of Joe Blow, Negro ball player, this kind of thing, which is as it should be. I think they should be judged solely on their abilities out there, and the race shouldn't have anything to do with it.
But they always used to, of course, they mentioned it for several years. It was like, and in this corner, and a credit to his race on radio, they always used to say that, and that way you knew.
Right.
No white man was ever a credit to his race on radio. It was always, always black. There must have been tough times. Well, obviously there must have been tough times, but I often wonder how you got what temper you have to have under control at times. So weren't things yelled at you?
Oh, there were a number of things, but I worked for a great guy. I don't think anybody could have done the job had it not been for Mr. Rickey. He was constantly advising and guiding, and I had so much confidence in him. I would have jumped off the bridge if he told me to do it. That's how much I believed in him. And he was a man that was sincere and dedicated and willing to lend that helping hand that's so needed today in terms of the problems that we face in everyday life. Not enough people are willing to do as Mr. Rickey did.
What advice did he give you, though, about when you get out there and somebody's going to yell? Well, what was yelled at you? What kind of things?
Well, you name them in terms of race, and they were yelled. Everything, it was quite vicious. I think it's Philadelphia Phillies, with Ben Chapman, was perhaps the most vicious of any of the people in terms of name-calling.
The team members?
Some members of the team, but there is a fellow by the name of Lee Hanley on that ball club that came down to first base when I was there and apologized for the Phillies. He just says, I just want you to know all of us don't feel that way, but it's been led by the manager, and many of the guys are doing it simply because of instructions, I would have to imagine. But it did give me a good feeling to know that in spite of what was coming out of the Philly dugout, one guy would come down and say he's awfully sorry. And actually what they did was to sort of solidify the Brooklyn Ball Club, because Mr. Rickey told me one of the things he said early was that when your ball club starts to take up for you in certain situations, our battle is most of the way won. And I think that Philly incident started the Dodgers to kind of mold as a unit.
Was that the worst, Philly?
Yes,
Yeah.
Philly was the worst. Ben Chapman was quite vicious. He wasn't only vicious as far as black people are concerned. I think he was anti-everything. So but
Where is he today?
God only knows.
But the team members, was this while you were on, when you came onto the field that they would yell things, or was it while the game was going on? I mean, could some of it have been just strategy to help get
Well,
you
they
mad
thought,
when you get-
I'm sure that a lot of it was thought to be strategy, but it wasn't going to upset me. There was really too much to be done at that particular time in terms of breaking the baseball barrier to allow name calling to bother me. I keep remembering what my mother told me when I was a kid, although I've always been a guy that turned back. She said something about sticks and stones will break your bones, you know, and so not to be concerned about it. Well, I didn't at the time, and fortunate for the advice that I got from Mr. Rickey and the encouragement and the guidance I got from my wife at home, we were able to withstand most of the kinds of situations that came up. We were prepared because of the numbers of people on our side.
Yeah. I've heard that some of the players since have felt guilty about not supporting you, that people have come up and said, I wish at the time I had been a little braver or something.
Well, I think Carl Erskine, who, in my opinion, probably had the most understanding of the whole situation, he was quite concerned. In Roger Kahn's book, Boys of the Summer, he points out that he would feel awfully guilty when we go into a restaurant in the South and all the white fellows would be able to go in and sit down and eat, and the rest of us would have to sit in the bus and wait for a sandwich or something to be brought out to us. And he was guilty that he didn't participate more.
While becoming the first black player in the MLB, Robinson helped the Dodgers win the 1947 Rookie of the Year award, helping Brooklyn reach their first World Series. Jackie won the National League for the Most Valuable Player and led the Dodgers to win another World Series. Robinson would also help the Dodgers to another World Series, however, lost that year to the Yankees in 1955. With two more World Series losses to the Yankees in a long way, Robinson finally helped the Dodgers beat the Yankees in the Fall Classic, adding World Championship to his name. Jackie Robinson ultimately retired in 1956 and was elected to the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame in 1962, becoming the first ever African American player to reach the Hall of Fame. However, he didn't stop there. He would later on be famous for becoming an activist to black people in America and was on the board of the NAACP, where he continued his fight for civil rights and equality. Jackie died on October 24th of 1972 at the age of 53 in Stamford, Connecticut, but his works and actions will still continue to this day. With that being said, Jackie Robinson is truly an inspiration for many athletes of color. Guys, that has been it for this episode. I hope you have been aware about the problems of racism that many athletes deal with. I hope that any young athlete watching this video takes this as motivation. Before I end, please like and subscribe, as well as please fill out the Google form in the link in the description. See you all next time. Peace out.